let's first talk about the thing that I learned recently that I was like, what in the world? Hello to all of you beautiful birthing people. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be all about 10 facts that nobody told you about breastfeeding. Some of these are pretty cool, some of them are kind of weird. All of them are great facts for you to share at a party. If you are at a party where people are talking about breastfeeding, which sounds like every party I've ever been to. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the video. But before we do so, I want to talk a little bit today about pumping, because we know pumping is a form of breastfeeding, and for those of us who exclusively pump, which I have done in the past, or who need to pump when they're away from baby, we know that having comfort with our breast pumping is so important. So just like with breastfeeding where it shouldn't be painful, with pumping it should not be painful either. And it can be painful for a variety of reasons. Some people really struggle with finding the right size flange or with pumping at too high of a volume. But even when you have the right size flange, sometimes that hard plastic can still be pretty uncomfortable on your nipples. And for me personally, I have something called elastic nipples, which I have a whole video about. I have tons of videos about pumping because I have exclusively pumped in the past. And also, like, I don't know how I exclusively pumped, like, pat on the back to me, because that is a hard thing to do. I am not the biggest fan of pumping right now. But one thing that I do that makes pumping easier is use Bogen cushion. So let me grab them and I'll show you guys real fast. So the Bogen cushion is this really soft silicone, and what it does is it sits right inside of your flange. It's going to size down your flange a little bit, and it also is going to provide a little bit of extra stick and grip on your nipples. So if you're like me and suffer from elastic nipple tissue, which basically for me, if I pump without these, my nipple will go all the way and it will hit the back of the flange. The times that I've made strawberry milk, which is when there's blood mixed in with your milk, is from cracks at the tip of my nipple from hitting the flange. So this keeps that nipple tissue, that really stretchy tissue, from getting pulled so far in. It sizes down the flange a little bit, and it makes pumping so much more comfortable. And we know with more comfortable pumping and better fitting flange size that we get better milk output. Now, I have talked about the Bogen cushions for years on my channel, and I have a discount code, but right now they're actually having a sale, a Mother's Day sale, and it's 3 weeks of sales. We're in the second week of the sales. So for May 2nd through the rest of this week, you can get 20% off by using the code DaysOfMom20 on their website. I will have a link down below. And I know that you guys love and use these too, because with my discount code, I get told every time somebody purchases it. And I have had you guys purchase a lot of these. So these have really been an integral part of my breastfeeding relationship, and I don't talk about things on my channel unless I have used them and loved them, and Bogen cushions are definitely those. So they come in a box like this. I normally buy a 2-pack, so I get 4 every single time. Depending on how often you pump, you do need to replace them monthly or more infrequently if you aren't pumping as often, but for me, definitely worth it. I use my own discount code as well, and I'm going to be stocking up for the end of my pumping journey with the current Mother's Day sale. So definitely check that out if you want to. And then let's go ahead and jump into the rest of the video. So when we're talking about breastfeeding, we know that you latch your baby onto the breast and they suckle and milk comes out, right? It's a little bit more complicated than that. Let's first talk about the thing that I learned recently that I was like, what in the world? When your baby suckles, there are 4 to 20 holes per breast that milk comes out of. 4 to 20. I have tried to look on myself. I feel like maybe I've got about 5 on each side, but 20, what a waterfall. That's crazy. And these are actually called milk duct orifices. So when your baby is suckling, they are bringing milk from different parts of your breast, and it's all kind of converging in the nipple. So with a bottle nipple, with a bottle teat, you're gonna have 1 hole, but with breastfeeding, you can have 4 to 20 holes per nipple. And if you have had your nipples pierced, sometimes you will have milk come out of that area where the piercing was, or sometimes you might have more of an issue with having clogged ducts if there's scar tissue in that nipple piercing. So the first thing when we think of when we're talking about latching our baby to the breast and them suckling and nursing, that very first latch, it's going to be amazing, is you will have people all over, from your mom to your grandma, anybody who's breastfeed might tell you, oh my gosh, it's gonna hurt so bad in the beginning. It's gonna hurt so bad. You're gonna have cracks, you're gonna have blisters, you're gonna have bleeding, you're gonna have everything under the sun. And while that may be a common experience, it is not a normal experience. Breastfeeding should not hurt, period. It shouldn't hurt. It may be slightly sore in the beginning. For me, for about the first month, I noticed that it was sore immediately when baby latched on for like a few breaths, and then that went away. But if it's more than that, if that little piranha latches onto you and you want to unlatch them and throw them across the room, you need to be getting some help from an international board certified lactation consultant. There are a myriad of reasons why breastfeeding might be painful. Sometimes what we see is that we just need to have a wider latch from baby. If they have more breast tissue, then that tissue is going to be sucked back and they're not going to be holding onto it with their gums. Sometimes what we see is that babies have a lot of tension when they first come out. They have a hard time opening their mouth. They have a hard time relaxing. And as they slowly start to unfurl, or we help them with a little bit of tension work from a craniosacral therapist or a chiropractor, that latch gets a little bit easier. Sometimes there's more of an anatomical issue where we're noticing a tie, a tongue tie or a lip tie or buccal ties that are causing baby to not be able to properly use the tongue. And so the compensatory mechanisms that they're using, so instead of holding very gently with the lips to create suction and that tongue bringing the nipple back, they're holding on with their gums and mouthing with their gums, which freaking hurts because while babies don't have teeth, that can be painful. The good news is when your baby does get teeth, because they are creating suction with their lips and suction and movement with their tongue, those teeth will not, should not cause nipple pain, and you can still breastfeed once your babies get teeth. Now, sometimes you might have to deal with a little bit of biting or a little bit of an uncomfortable latch that you might need to readjust because baby's like, oh my God, what's happening here? My mouth is painful. But simply the act of having teeth does not mean that you can't breastfeed because the gums and the teeth are not involved in the breastfeeding experience. So your milk, your mature milk, is going to take about 3 to 5 days to come in. Before that, you are going to have colostrum, which is a thicker, really protein-rich milk that's great for babies in the first few days of life. It isn't very much milk, but their tummy is also very small, so most of the time those two things work out really well together. For some people, if baby's not latching, not getting the milk that they need, we might recommend that you express your milk. One way you can do that is by using a breast pump, of course, but when we are expressing colostrum, hand expression tends to work better because of this thickness of the colostrum. I will, in the description below, link my favorite hand expression video. It's from Stanford. I recommend, with the advice and the permission of your doctor to make sure that it's safe for you, going ahead and starting to practice hand expression at the end of your pregnancy. It may help bring on contractions if you're about to go into labor, but it's only really going to work if you're about to go into labor. But it can help you have a little bit of milk that you can bring in if needed, if baby's having issues with latching or having blood sugar issues or any other reason. And it gets you in the practice of what hand expression can look like. You can always hand express after baby's done nursing to give them a little bit of extra milk, or just hand express and have that for later if you want it. But hand expressing is something that I really recommend that you learn how to do because it does a great job of removing that colostrum. Now, when we think of colostrum, typically we think of it to be yellow, but it actually can be any color. It can be clear, yellow. Medications can make our milk green or blue. There is even sometimes when milk is like a rusty color. It's called rusty pipe syndrome. The first time I saw it, I was like, what in the world is this? And the OB was like, what in the world is this? And the lactation consultant was like, it's rusty pipe syndrome. So your breast milk can be a whole myriad of colors. And there used to be some thought like, hey, when I'm sick or when baby's sick, my milk changes colors and what I'm seeing is the antibodies. Look at this really antibody-rich yellow milk or green milk. And that simply is not the case. We can't visualize antibodies with our own eyes. What we might be seeing is like different compositions in the milk, differences in protein and fats and water content, all to help baby who is sick. And our breast milk does help baby that's sick, but you can't actually see antibodies in the milk. Speaking of things that you can't see in your milk, we have a whole bunch of hormones that get released into our milk, 2 of those being cortisol and melatonin. So the milk that you pump or the milk that you express or the milk that baby drinks directly from you is going to kind of help with their circadian rhythm. In the morning, your milk will be higher in cortisol to wake them up, and at night, your milk will be higher in melatonin. So if you are doing shift work, if you are away from your baby in the morning and in the evening and you're noticing that they're having a really hard time with their sleep, it might be beneficial for you to label your milk AM and PM so baby is getting that cortisol milk in the morning and that melatonin milk at night. It might help with their sleeping. Speaking of pumping and breastfeeding your baby, The important thing to remember is that empty breasts make more milk. Another hormone that we see is called FIL, and this hormone is actually responsible for telling your body that you don't need to make more milk. So when your breasts are super full, there's more of this hormone that reports back to your brain, hey, this breast doesn't need to make any more milk. And so when our breasts are empty, they make more milk, which is why it's important in the first 12 to 16 weeks that you are repeatedly emptying your breast every 2 to 3 hours, either by baby or by pumping. And of course, baby's gonna start to sleep a little bit longer, but you don't wanna go super long stretches of time because that's gonna tell your body to not make as much milk eventually over time. And what you're gonna notice is when your milk supply regulates, which happens between 12 and 16 weeks, you might have gone from making tons and tons of milk to now your body's saying, hey, we're going to make only as much as we think that this baby needs based on milk removal. And then it can be way more difficult afterwards to kind of bring that milk supply back up. Especially if you are exclusively pumping and baby is not draining your breast effectively, it's really important to keep on this every 2 to 3 hours during the day. Give yourself 1 4-hour chunk overnight of expression to help create a really robust supply so that when your milk supply does regulate and you are able to pump a little bit less frequently, you have a supply that is really strong and ready to handle that change. Something that I am currently dealing with is the important fact that your breast tissue goes all the way up into your armpit. I currently have a clogged duct that is trying very hard to find its way into mastitis. I'm using the potato hat currently. I'm taking a break right now while filming, but I have a video all about mastitis and clogged ducts that I will link right here. But what's crazy is that we have breast tissue all the way up here. There will be some women who actually find out that they have an ancillary nipple. It almost looks like a mole in their armpit that they can express milk out of. When your milk comes in, you get Dolly Parton boobs. It looks like you've had a breast augmentation because there's so much swelling in the upper portion all the way up into your armpits. So you just want to make sure if you are experiencing a clog that you're massaging all the way up there. I've talked a little bit about seeking help from a lactation consultant. An international board certified lactation consultant is going to be our gold standard. We also have lactation counselors. They're a little bit less regulated. But the important thing to note with either one of those, not all lactation consultants are created equally. Not all are seeking extra education. Maybe they're not as thorough in tongue ties or not as knowledgeable in pumping. So kind of take that with a grain of salt when you're getting advice from somebody and it doesn't feel like it's the right advice to fit you and your personal situation. Maybe seeking out and finding another lactation consultant to throw ideas around with and figuring out what's going to work specifically for you. The last things I want to talk about is breastfeeding an older baby, which I do not think gets enough talk here in the lactation breastfeeding pregnancy world because we're all really focused on getting that breastfeeding relationship to work right in the beginning. But breastfeeding an older infant gets insane. The positions that they get into, the gymnastics, the crazy things that they do while they're nursing, it can make it really, really difficult. One of my favorite go-to tips for you if you have a baby who is doing all sorts of crazy things with breastfeeding or getting really, really distracted while breastfeeding is go ahead and breastfeed them in a carrier. That keeps them nice and contained, snuggled close to you, and they can't whip their head around if they have the hood up and kind of almost like blinders to really focus on the breast. I do most of my breastfeeding with my 10-month-old in the carrier for this reason because we call her Nosy Rosie. She is literally the nosiest human being in the entire history of the world, and I do not know where she gets it from. It's me, but that's fine. So that's something that I feel like I wasn't super prepared with either of my older babies when they nursed because nobody had really talked about it before. But yeah, these babies are crazy, and it's not that you don't have enough milk, it's just that often other things are more exciting than breastfeeding. I found that she does a lot of good nursing if she's had a busy day where she's not nursing a lot during the day. At night she'll make up for those lost calories there. And we do know that you make the most milk between 2 and 5 a.m. That's when our levels of prolactin are the highest that tell our body to make the most milk. So for some people, they really need that nighttime milk removal to affect their supply throughout the day. And if you're noticing a really big dip in supply in the evening, try adding another milk removal between that 2 and 5 a.m. so that you can make more milk in the evening, because that's kind of how it all works. Pretty crazy, right? Okay, I hope that this video was helpful. Just some tips about breastfeeding. I have a whole video about what your nurse wants you to know about breastfeeding that's more about in the hospital, but this is more about after, when you're home and you're trying to figure out exactly what's going on, because it is a crazy experience, but you are more than up to it. And also, I do want to say breastfeeding does not have to be all or nothing. Combo feeding, formula or donor milk and directly breastfeeding from the breast are totally fine. Pumping is totally fine. Find whatever works best for you and your mental health and your baby, and you guys will be happy and healthy and safe. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, guys.